there's a lot of material in all this course, and there's a lot of material in this lesson. So when we get done, I will, if you want me to send this to you electronically, I need your email. If you don't, you say, I don't do electronics, we will run it off for you. It's not that big of a deal. And you can have all the material. Okay, you know what I mean by run it off, right? I don't mean chase it away. I mean make copies. So let's just pray. Lord, we thank you for this lesson today and for this class, oh God, for everyone that's here. We ask you, Lord, to bless this. Bless this in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Amen. All right, we're talking about changing attitudes. And an attitude, as I'm sure it's on your sheet, is an expression of favor or disfavor toward a person, place, thing, or event. The attitude object. One psychologist, Gordon Allport, described attitude as the most distinctive and indispensable concept in contemporary social psychology. Attitudes can be formed from a person's past and present. Attitude is also measurable and changeable, as well as influence the person's emotion and behavior. So, if you put it in lay language, attitude may refer to the distinct concept of mood, or be especially synonymous with rebellion, such as teenage rebellion. And there are ways to measure attitudes, and I'm not going to go into that, except to say there's explicit measurements, and the word explicit just means, without a doubt. It's like black and white. They're kind of like what we call bipolar scales. When we talk about somebody being bipolar, we think of a mental disorder, but the word bipolar, it means anything that's opposites, like good, bad, favorable, unfavorable, support, oppose. And so sometimes we measure an attitude that way. It's either good or bad, it's either favorable or unfavorable, it's either support or oppose, etc., etc., etc. There are implicit measurements. Implicit means that it's not something that's readily seen. And I don't have time to go into this in great detail, but it's like a person may say on the outside with their mouth, say prejudice. I'm not a prejudiced person, and it doesn't have to be race, it could be any kind of prejudice. But yet, truthfully, in reality, they are. So they sort of deceive themselves, and you can't measure that attitude by what you hear, even sometimes by what you see, because they're harboring an attitude inside. That's what they really believe. And so things have to happen to make that come to the surface. So when you're dealing with somebody, when you're dealing with attitude change, you have to bring that to the surface. And the way peace comes into a life is when you can align what a person really believes with what they say. So that's one of the big things about changing attitudes. And there's a lot of information about attitude function. An attitude serves a particular function for individuals, and so people have tried to understand what these functions are. And so Daniel Katz, he's written a lot on the subject, and I'm going to follow his outline. He writes that attitudes can serve instrumental, adjustive, or utilitarian, ego defensive, value expressive, or knowledge functions. And I'm going to go into those, but they do follow a function. So these are the 4 different groups based on an attitude function. One is utilitarian. That provides us with a general approach or avoidance tendency. So a person who is utilitarian, they have an attitude that's utilitarian. they're going to be into a lot of avoidance. Have you ever had somebody come and talk to you and there's the problem, you know the problem and they know the problem, and they'll talk to you and they never mention the problem?
Yeah. They never mention what?
They never mention the problem.
But they don't. Oh.
They avoid it, so they talk all around it and up.
Yeah.
You know that. So but that's a utilitarian. It's kind of a defense mechanism. And then there's knowledge. People who are attitude, you know, basically knowledge attitude. They're into organization. So you have to help people organize and interpret new information because they're. And I'll go into this in just a minute. Ego defensive attitudes help people protect their self-esteem, and value expressive that's used to express central values or beliefs. So these are the four basic groups. Let's go back, and I'm not going to make all the applications he did. I'm going to make the applications that are pertinent to what we're doing. But the utilitarian people adopt attitudes that are rewarding and that help them avoid punishment. So in other words, any attitude that is adopted in a person's own self-interest is considered to serve a utilitarian function. So you could consider it this way, and this is just one way, but you can put your own story. Consider that you have a condo, and people with condos pay property tax, and as a result, you don't want to pay more taxes. So if those factors lead to your attitude that increases in property taxes are bad, your attitude is serving a utilitarian function. You're taking an attitude towards taxes that's really personal with you. So it's your own favor. You know, in other words, just what does it do for me? So it's utilitarian. Knowledge people need to maintain an organized, meaningful, and stable view of the world. This is people with a knowledge, you know, their knowledge, that's their attitude. So that being said, important values and general principles can provide a framework for our knowledge. So give her one of those things there. Attitudes achieve this goal by making things fit together and make sense. So knowledge people have a well-ordered world. They've ordered the world according to the way they believe. And that's their attitude towards it. So everything has to fit together and make sense. So this would be an example. I believe that I'm a good person. I believe that good things happen to good people. Something bad happens to Bob. That's just a made-up name. So I believe Bob must be a good person. I must not be a good person because something bad happened to him. That's the way they order their world. That's their attitude. So there are people that, because of the way they've ordered their world, their attitude toward the world, they really do believe that when misfortune comes to someone, that it's something they did. And it's I deal with that attitude all the time with people, and even the people who things happen to, they think, oh, it's something I did. They get into that same thing because others convince them that it was something they did, or maybe that's just the way they look at the world. And I try to convince them that that's not true, that it's not anything they did. Bad things happen to Jesus. So he didn't have a bad attitude. You know. So then the ego defensive, this function involves psychoanalytic principles where people use defense mechanism to protect themselves from psychological harm. And those include denial, repression, projection, and rationalization. Have you ever run into any of those? Yeah. People who live in the great state of denial. There are people who repress feelings. There are people that project their situation onto others or other people's situation onto themselves. And then there are people who rationalize everything. So the ego defensive notion correlates not with a downward comparison theory that holds that the view that if you're derogatory towards a less fortunate, increases your own well-being. If you've ever seen people who will throw off on other people, they will put other people down to make themselves look good. They look at life that way. That if I can make this person look bad, I can make me look good. And so that's this kind of an attitude. And then value expressive. That serves to express one's central values and self-concept. Central values tend to establish our identity and gain us social approval, thereby showing us who we are and where we stand. And that's, for example, that would concern attitudes towards a controversial political issue. You have a political issue, then our attitude toward that issue basically tells us who we are and where we stand. We identify with that. I'm kind of that way about abortion. I identify with that issue. So I vote. I'm like a one-issue person. I vote my vote according to that issue. So, but anyway, that has to do with value expressive, that we express our values in our attitude that way. But anyway, there's a whole section in here on attitude formation, and I just don't have time in this session to go through that because there's other things I want to do. But I'm going to give you all this material. I promise if you want it, and you can go back and you can read it. Let's look at about attitude change. We've talked to you all about the different categories. Attitudes can be changed. Now, sometimes personalities don't change, but attitudes can change through persuasion, and there's an important domain of research on attitude that changes focus on responses to communication. Experimental research into the factors that can affect the persuasiveness of a message include target characteristics. These are the characteristics that refer to the person who receives and processes a message. One such trait is intelligence, and it seems that the more intelligent a person is, the less likely they will be easily persuaded by a one-sided message. There are people who, if you get to them first with your opinion, that's their opinion, and it can't be changed. It's very hard to change. But the more intelligent a person is, the more they realize that they're, like Brother Weeks used to say, there are two sides to every story, and sometimes 3 or 4 more. So, and another variable that has been studied in this category is self-esteem. And although it is sometimes thought that those higher in self-esteem are less easily persuaded, there's some evidence that says that actually the more self-esteem you have, the more comfortable you are with yourself, the easier you are to persuade. But anyway, the major source characteristics are expertise, trustworthiness, interpersonal attraction, and attractiveness. The credibility of a perceived message. Every time we get a message, we have an attitude toward that message based on some of the things I've been talking about. The credibility of a perceived message has been found to be a key variable. One reads a report about health, and he believes it came from a professional medical journal. So one may be more easily persuaded than if one believes that it was from the Inquirer. Some psychologists have debated whether this is a long-lasting effect, but anyway, there's a thing called sleeper effect that says that you can be persuaded by believing the credibility of a source only for so long, but then you revert back to your attitude. But anyway, message characteristics. The nature of the message plays a role in persuasion. Sometimes presenting both sides of a story is useful to help change attitudes. When people are not motivated to process the message, simply the number of arguments presented in a persuasive message will influence attitude change, with such that a greater number of arguments will produce a greater attitude change. So, and then there's cognitive routes. let me just say, a message can appeal to an individual's cognitive evaluation to help change an attitude. In the central route to persuasion, the individual is presented with the data and motivated to evaluate the data and arrive at an attitude-changing conclusion. But I want to tell you, having said that, those are just things that I'm just throwing out there. You need to read up on this from this source, because I don't have time to go into these in detail. Yes?
I was born a quiet natured person, and I know why now. And it's a process that I'm going through. It takes a lot to get on my nerves, really and truly does. And I try, by the help of the grace of God, to be very prayerful before I speak, because death and life is in the power of the tongue.
It's true.
But once I am really angry, 3 blocks down, you will hear me.
Right.
What does cognitive mean?
Cognitive means knowledge, to know. If you're a cognitive something, you're aware. You're aware of it.
I'm sorry.
You're aware of it. Cognitive means being aware.
To be aware?
Okay. Let me just say, I'm going to get into the most important part of this lesson, because all those other things are just leading up to it, and I want you to read that in this manuscript, because some of them are very technical, and we need to understand everything about attitude and how to change. But let me just say, everything we do is affected directly or indirectly by our attitudes. A change in a person's attitude can affect just about everything else in a person's life. Even a small shift in attitude adjustment can really have a profound effect on what we do and how we do it. And if you've ever had a son or daughter in school, you know how true this is. Because you know, I mean, you have a child, you reared that child, they go to school, and all of a sudden their attitudes change toward things that you taught them better, and you realize, you have to be aware that a change in attitude results in a change in grades and dress and habits and friends. So it's good to understand that. The better the attitude, the better the results in almost everything we do. Because the attitude affects our feelings, and feelings affect what we do and how well we do it. So having a good attitude can be the deciding factor in our success or failures. That's why so much emphasis is placed on this. That's why I want to spin off of this into a whole bunch of sessions, a whole thing on attitude. Because the right attitude gives us an important edge. And since our attitudes are the results of our programming, then it makes good sense to take a look at our attitudes, the attitudes that we are living with, why they are what they are, and which of them we might like to change. Not all of our attitudes are wrong. Our attitude toward God may be really right. Our attitude toward some people may be really wrong. So you want to change that, but you don't want to change the other. Not everything in your life is wrong. So some things belong there. But because every attitude that we have affects how we feel about everything around us and what we do about it, our attitudes are important. So without the right attitudes, we're never going to have the key that unlocks the treasure chest of happiness and success that we really, really want. I mean, we want to be happy. Even the framers of the Constitution, the Declaration, they said that we had unalienable rights. We have the right to life, we have the right to liberty, and we have the right to the pursuit of happiness. And Benjamin Franklin said, all we can do was guarantee the right to pursue happiness, but you have to catch it for yourself. And so that's sort of what we're talking about here. Attitudes create the biggest part of the picture that we see of ourselves. They're the filters through which we view everything in our sight. Our attitudes are our dispositions. They are the state of mind we live in. So our attitudes express themselves through our mood, through our temperament, through our willingness, and our hesitations. You take a church, you have different leadership, and you have different people that are supposed to do certain things, and it's really hard to try to run a church or any organization when you have someone with bad attitudes or contrary attitudes. You know, if everybody's working together, it's great, but it all has to do with attitude, and you never can expect everybody to work together because people bring their attitudes into this situation.
Amen.
So you have to deal with that attitude. So our attitudes propel us forward toward our victories, or they bog us down in defeat. They are the foothold beneath us in every step that we take. They are what others see most of the personality within us. In other words, you remember our iceberg model, most of it's hidden, one little bit is out of the water. That's what people see. Well, that's the personality. That's what they mostly see. They describe us, they define us, they project the image we present to the world around us. So our attitudes will make us rich or poor, happy or unhappy, fulfilled or incomplete. They are the single most determining factor in every single action that we make. We and our attitudes are inextricably combined. We are our attitudes, and our attitudes are us. So, Norman Vincent Peale, I love Norman Vincent Peale. I guess I'm sort of a disciple of his, you know. Anybody ever heard of him? Well, you should, if you never have, how many know how to Google? I know you know how to Google. Google Norman Vincent Peale, because he was incredible. He was a Presbyterian minister, and he got into positive thinking, but he did it with a very theological stand. He was a preacher, and a very good one. I used to listen to it. We traveled. My wife and I traveled evangelizing when we were very young, and we listened on the radio. And I always listened. He was at a Marble Collegiate Church in New York. He was pastor, and they broadcast. I mean, that was back before people broadcast on television and had all this media stuff going everywhere. I mean, for somebody to have their whole service broadcast nationwide, coast to coast, that was amazing. And you could hear Norman Vincent Peale every Sunday night. He would preach. And he told a story once, and I just love this story. I think it's great. And he starts his story, he says, I'll never forget, he said, the night I met Miss Nobody. He said, after making a speech in the West Coast city, he said, I was shaking hands with people who came up to greet me, and along came this young woman who gave a very limp handshake, and she said in a very small and timid voice, that, I thought I'd like to shake hands with you, but I really shouldn't be bothering you. There are so many important people here, and I'm just a nobody. So forgive me for taking your time. Norman Vincent Peale said, well, I looked at her and I said, will you do me a favor? He said, would you please remain for a few minutes? And so she said she would. He said, I'd like to talk to you. And he said, well, I was really surprised. He said, I didn't think she would. But she did. She did as he suggested. So he said, when I was finished greeting the others, he said, I came back and I said, now, Miss Nobody, let's sit down and have a visit, a little visit. And she said, what did you call me? I said, surprise. Says, I called you by the only name you gave. You told me you were a nobody. He said, do you have another name? And she said, of course. He said, I thought you must have one. He said, one reason I wanted to talk to you is to find out how anybody can get the idea that she's a nobody. And another reason is that referring to yourself this way, in my opinion, is an affront to God. She said, oh, Dr. Peale, she's saying, you can't be serious, an affront to God? He said, you are a child of God, created in His image. So it really hurts me, and it bothers me to hear you say that you're a nobody. And see, so he said, look, tell me a little bit about yourself. And she described her circumstances and problems, and he said she talked haltingly, but with evident relief at being able to confide in someone. And she said, so you see, he said, I've quite an inferiority complex, and sometimes I get really discouraged, and I came to hear you tonight hoping you might say something that would help me. And so Peale said, well, he says, I'm going to say it to you now. He said, you are a child of God. And he said, I advise her to draw herself up tall each day and say to herself, I am a child of God. And she looked at him with a very lovely smile, and she said, I'm going to do that. And she said, would you pray for me? And he did. He prayed for her right on the spot. And he said, I prayed the Lord would help her to acquire real enthusiasm about herself and some proper self-confidence as well. And he said, I was speaking later, much later in the same area, and this attractive young woman approached me and said, do you remember? Do you remember me? And he said, well, have we met before? And she said, yeah, we have. I said, I am the former Miss Nobody. And he said, oh, then I remembered. And he said, I knew that she had fared extremely well since our first meeting. He said, I could tell it from her manner and the sparkle in her eyes, even before she had time to report everything that had happened to her in words. She had discovered her extension powers as a child of God. And that incident underscores an important fact, that you can change, that anybody can change. And even from a dull nobody to an enthusiastic somebody. And in addition to Miss Nobody, I've seen many, Peel says, I've seen many people change, and change greatly. And I have too. They cease to be defeated, and they become altogether different in nature. So they are hardly the same individuals. You know, less attractive qualities have given way to better ones, and their personalities have been dramatically brought out and enhanced. And as a result, they enter on a life that's so full of happiness and success and creativity that people around them marvel. What in the world happened to them? You see, you feel like asking, who are you? What did you do with this other person? And they marvel too. And why not? Because it really is a marvel. You know, and in the years that I've tried to emphasize it, as I said, I love Norman Vincent Peale, and I guess he did inspire me, but we went into, Sister Wyser and I went into a lot more things, but we talk about creative living through spiritual practice. Now, I don't believe in humanism. I believe that God is supreme, and when God is the center of a life, then that's a good first step. And that you can't expect to really have much success in life if you don't put God in the center of your life. But I have seen people who were literally packed full of hate changed into people equally full of love. I have watched defeated individuals shed anxiety as they absorb the amazing secret of victory. I have observed people who suffer from fear transform into courageous, worry-free persons. That's how powerful it is. And we need to understand this, especially if we want to do any leadership, because we're managing the attitude of others then. And you have to understand these principles. If you understand them in yourself, then you can have a chance to understand them in other people. So first you have to, before you can change attitudes of somebody else, you have to change attitudes in yourself. Has anybody seen what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yes.
Jesus is the doctor that never lost your case.
That's right.
His word is medicine. And when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, then you do it the way that he said to do it.
Yeah.
And when we do it that way, we'll grow in our spirit. And when you grow in your spirit, we're developing. This is why this is a hospital. And you are being, in other words, you're very, now that's why I had to come in here, because when I came here, I seen out of your belly is flowing rivers of living water. And I need to hear attentively what you have been saying, and you have been blessed in my spirit. And I am growing. In other words, God came in my life 44 years ago. He himself led me into the sinner's prayer. But it seemed like last year, I really started growing. So it took me a while to get around that.
All right.
But I'm here now.
That's great.
That's what he's great.
That's great. And she makes a point. Jesus had a perfect attitude.
Yes, he did.
So, and everything else that he did for us, showing us how to live, he showed us how to have the right attitude. He even told us, the Beatitudes, it should be called the Attitude Beatitudes, because he just talks about attitude. And he said, now that's because he was God in the flesh. So he was saying, You heard it said, but this is how God looks at it. And he said, this is the attitude God wants. So if you line up with the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, you have the right attitude. And Jesus came to display that attitude. And that it was a tremendous thing. But before we can ever change attitudes in anybody else, we've got to change attitudes in ourselves.
Right.
How many know that's a tough thing?
Yeah.
You know, an attitude that we might like to change, you know, it doesn't have to be a clematis, you know, something that's just like a calamity or way in extreme. It could be a problem that's just simple. You know, an attitude of just fine-tuned a little can make parts of our daily life work better. And because even the simplest or the most important of our attitudes can be changed by redoing a piece or two of our programming, if we would like to make the change and we know how to make that programming change, there really isn't any impassable obstacle that's stopping us from going ahead and doing it. Don't get caught up in, oh, I can't. You can. You can do anything you ought to do.
Amen.
You can do it. So, the attitudes which you have about yourself create one additional important result. The attitudes you have about yourself determine the attitude that you will have about everything else around you. So, you know, it's like I tell this story. I preach a sermon or do a lesson on attitude, and I talk about this man who is his you know how grandparents, when you're a parent, I don't know what there is about being a parent, but you're kind of uptight. But when you become a grandparent, have you become a grandparent yet, Brother? You're not. You did? Okay. Anybody here are grandparents? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. We have our oldest granddaughter. I would never say, I'm saying it out over there. I hope she's listening. I hope the other one's not listening. But we kind of bonded with her. She was a little baby, like, and we feel very, very protective of her. You know, we just we love our grandchild. So I was thinking about this grandmother and grandfather who, because when you get grandchildren, you don't go see your children anymore, you go see your grandkids. They went to see the grandkids. Well, grandpa, he liked to take a nap every day, so he took a nap, and one of the grandkids, you know, both of them were there, I think there's a couple of grandkids, one of them put some Limburger cheese on his mustache.
Oh, my.
So he woke up and he said, man, he said, this room stinks. So he went into the kitchen and he said, this kitchen stinks. And then he went through the whole house and said, this house stinks. And then he went outside and he said, the whole world stinks. Well, that's the way some people are about everything. I mean, it colors everything they do. Everything stinks. When they're at home, it stinks. When they're at school, it stinks. And they work, it stinks. They come to church, it stinks. Everything just stinks, you know. And that's what I say. The attitude that you have within yourself is the attitude you're going to have for everything else. And so that's the reason that most of the attitude changing self-talk deals with you and how you see yourself. So to illustrate that, examine an actual pre-written script of attitude changing self-talk. This category of self-talk includes such subject titles as freedom from worry, taking responsibility for yourself, building self-esteem, positive talk for teams, overcoming obstacles, determination and willpower, successful marriage, overcoming personal limitations, and believing in an incredible you. But let's just take the self-talk script for personal responsibility. See, our attitudes about the part of each of us plays in our own earthly destiny are some of the most important attitudes we will ever hold. So the difference between having an attitude of accepting responsibility for who we are and what we do, and having an attitude that makes excuses or places our lives in the hands of others, is really essentially our ability to achieve a sense of self. And the individual fulfillment, which is self-responsibility, which that self-responsibility creates within ourselves. So, even consider the importance which this one attitude plays in each of our lives. I want you to notice how directly and effectively even a few self-talk statements can address a subject, simplify it, and begin the reprogramming process of an attitude that is essential to all of us. Now, what I want to give you is this self-talk on, and you got it there in your notes, self-talk on taking responsibility for yourself. Because we need to get there. This is fundamental. You are responsible. You're responsible for your happiness. You're responsible for your own actions. You cannot blame other people. No matter what anybody does to you, it's still your responsibility how that you respond to it. Jesus Christ came, he said, I'm a stumbling block or a stepping stone. Depending. Some people looked at Jesus as a stepping stone to greater things. And some people looked at him because of the attitude toward him, toward themselves also, they looked at him as a stumbling block. Everything in life is that way. We have to realize how we are responsible. So let's just look at the self-talk for taking responsibility for yourself. You read along with me. And this is something just good for you for developing your own attitude. So I take full responsibility for everything about me, even the thoughts that I think. I'm in control of the vast resources of my mind. That's Bible. Bring every thought into captivity. I alone am responsible for what I do and what I tell myself about me. No one can share this responsibility with me. You're not responsible. No matter what somebody tells you, and no matter how bad it is, you're not responsible for what they say, and you don't have to receive it. I also allow others to accept their responsibility for themselves, and I do not try to accept their responsibilities for them. I enjoy being responsible. It puts me in charge of being me, and that's a challenge that I enjoy. I allow no one else at any time to assume control or responsibility over my life or over anything that I do. My responsibility to others is an extension of my own responsibility to myself. I choose to leave nothing about me up to chance. When it comes to me and anything in my life, I choose to choose. My choices are mine alone to make for myself. I do not at any time allow anyone else to make my choices for me, and I accept full responsibility for every choice and decision I make. I always meet all of the obligations which I accept, and I accept no obligations which I will not meet. I am trustworthy, I can be counted on, I have accepted winning responsibility for myself, and I always live up to the responsibilities I accept. There is no one in whom I lay blame or with whom I share my own personal responsibilities. I have learned the great secret of mastering my own destiny. I have learned that they is me. You know, they this, they that. Me. I have no need to make excuses, and no one needs to carry my responsibility for me. I gladly carry my own weight, and I carry it well. Each day I acknowledge and accept the responsibilities, not only for my own actions, but also for my emotions, my thoughts, and my attitudes. I accept the responsibility for living my life in a way which creates my strength, my happiness, my positive, healthy beliefs, and for my past, my present, and my future. Now that's a good attitude. The kind of attitude which most of us could do with a little bit more of, or even a whole lot more of. It is an attitude which gets us to stand up for ourselves and be counted. It's an attitude which we can, if we choose, affect in our own lives anytime that we want. But it's just one attitude of many which each of us can address and put into motion just by reconvincing ourselves, by overriding the old programming which told us that other people, by some stroke of faith, count more than we do. And that's not true. There are a lot of, anybody have anything that they want to say about that? We're gonna go on. Yes.
I am fearfully and wonderfully made according to the scriptures. I do not have an inferior complex of who I am because God made me who He wants me to be. So that's the way, in other words, it takes a time to develop in this here. So in other words, He said, my people perish because of lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
So I'm getting more intellect by getting into the scriptures to see how He wants me to live today. So this is the day the Lord God has made.
Yes.
I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. I'm going to take the medicine and I'm going to say, ouch.
That's right.
But take
That's
it
right.
anyway.
That's right. So you see the wisdom of this. And there's another one I want to quickly go to, and then we're going to be dismissed. And also, there's a little thing at the end, a little exercise. Okay, you can go through that, but I can give you the answer, but I won't. You should know because of what we've been talking about. What? Yeah. Okay. Self-esteem. Now, let me tell you, I don't have time to go into this, but I teach a lot of marriage seminars, lots of them. And I teach about understanding men and women. And women are mostly self-esteem driven and men are mostly ego driven. And the difference between the two is that ego is more aggressive than self-esteem. Ego has to be defended, but so women mostly are talked about in terms of self-esteem. Men mostly in terms of ego. But I don't have time to go into all the ins and outs of that. But I'm just going to say, you can also, if you want to look at the men's side of self-talk for building self-esteem, you could also say that this is for the man for building or defending ego for the man. And someday we'll have I'll teach some of the things on marriage that go with that, but this is not one of those days, I'm afraid. But let's talk about self-talk for building self-esteem. I really am very special. I like who I am and I feel good about myself. And remember, it's not a sin to love yourself. Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So you need to love yourself. And you need to be assured that God loves you. I love what John said. He never hardly ever referred to himself as John. He always referred to himself as the disciple Jesus loved. The one Jesus loved. And I thought, that's really good. And he wasn't being egotistical. He was just saying, I know God loves me. He may love everybody else, and he does, but I know He loves me. So you need to be sure of that, but it's not wrong to love yourself.
The scripture says to love the Lord God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. First of all, you have to love God. That's the most important thing.
And know that God loves you.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So I am positive, I'm confident, I radiate good things. If you look closely, you can see a glow around me. I'm full of life, I like life, and I'm glad to be alive. I'm a special person. And by the way, full of life, I like life, I'm glad to be alive is a good key to long life.
That's right.
Just keep telling yourself that. I am a very special person living at a very special time. I'm intelligent, my mind is quick, alert, and clever and fun. I think good thoughts and my mind makes things work right for me. I have a lot of energy and enthusiasm and vitality. I am exciting and I really enjoy being me. I like being around other people and other people like being around me. People like to hear what I have to say and know what I have to think. I smile a lot, I'm happy on the inside, and I'm happy on the outside. I'm interested in many things. I appreciate all the blessings I have and the things that I learned and all the things I will learn today and tomorrow and forever, just as long as I am. I am warm, sincere, honest, and genuine. I am all of these things and more, and all of these things are me. I like who I am, and I'm glad to be me. What simple words these are, very simple, but what truths they tell us about ourselves. And I'm going to say one last thing, and then let's discuss it. The last thing I want to say is you need to take stock of your attitudes. Coming out of this, just take a real good look at your attitudes, and you'll see where you need to change. Yes, ma'am.
That was yum, yum, yum on my tum, tum, tum.
That's great. Anybody have any comment? Now, the exercise, what am I? What do you think that, what do you think it is? When this exercise at the end says, I am seldom considered, though I do more to influence everything about me. So read all the way through it, and what is it?
A way to change our attitude.
Yeah, it's I am attitude.
Just existing too.
So read about all that. I am attitude. That's what I am. So read all those things. Anybody have any comment?
I like all of it.
Yeah.
All the self things that you can say yourself. I mean, you know.
That's what this is. This is the most powerful concept you've ever run into. I'm telling you, it will work in every
Attitude
aspect.
is everything.
Yeah.
Like, you know, in sales they say attitude is altitude.
It is.
So,
In fact, that's the name of that thing I teach on attitude. I call it the altitude of attitude. Is your attitude? So my brother took me on a flight. My wife and I on a flight one time. He was a pilot, a small plane, and he had an attitude indicator on. Because he was telling me all they did. The attitude indicator. I said, I knew people have attitudes. I didn't know airplanes had attitudes.
yeah.
But he said, no. He said, an attitude of an airplane is its relationship to the horizon. If you're above it, if your nose is pointed up, you have a high out an attitude, nose up attitude. If you're going to put it down, you look at that, you have a nose down attitude. And so that's the same with us.
Yeah.
If we're going up, you know.
That's cool.
So, Paul said, "Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, who being the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but took upon himself the form of a servant." So he talks about attitude. He really talks about the attitude Jesus had, and he said, you need to have the same attitude. He's your attitude indicator.
Amen.
And so if you need to have the same attitude he is. If your nose is pointed up, you're going higher, higher, higher. If it's pointed down, you're heading for a crash. So you need to look at your attitude. You need to take an evaluation of your attitude. Where am I? Am I going up or am I going down? Because another thing too, you're going to arrive where you're headed. So you got to adjust. If a person doesn't want to go to hell, then they're going to have to adjust their attitude to go to heaven. Because if you have the attitude to go to hell, you're going to go to hell. If you have the attitude to go to heaven, you're going to go to heaven. You arrive where you're going. Well, praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. Hallelujah.
It would make more sense for Christ being in the horizon. If you go above him, you're the Pharisee and the Pharisee, and go below him,
Yeah, we
you're
got
the
time.
sinners.
You can say it that way.
Brother
Yeah.
Oscar, let Brother Oscar say what he wants.
Go ahead.
I'm just when you talk about Jesus, about his attitude, I know he has the right attitude in everything, and I just something came in my mind, and I say even when he get mad, he had the right attitude in the
Oh, yeah.
temple, and you know,
Well, he got mad with the right people at the right time in the right way.
yes, that's his you know, I God talked to me about that, yeah.
The book says, "Be angry and sin not."
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not wrong to be angry. You can get angry. I get angry. I tell you what I did one time. I preached 2 funerals in a row, pretty close together. Both of them young men. Both of them died as a result of drugs. One of a drug overdose. The other one, he was a drug addict and he stole some drugs and they beat him to death.
Oh.
But when I preached the second funeral, I had enough. I just had enough. And I got up and I never did it before. I preached that whole funeral in anger. I was angry.
Yeah.
And I told him I was angry.
Yeah.
But I really believe it was justified. Angry in the right way at the right time with the right thing.
Yeah.
You know?
I just put it together,
Yeah.
about the anger management too. You know,
Yeah, that's
something.
true. Yeah, we got to get you going on that again. He did a great job. But God was wrathful. He was,
Yeah.
The wrath of God, that's anger.
Yeah.
And-
And some people think because we Christian we can get mad, like
Oh no.
they can do anything to us. And
It's just that we have to, we have to control our spirits.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. We can't. I think there's also a difference between being angry and being vindictive. I'm angry with a lot of people. I don't appreciate some people, but my wife and I have talked about this greatly, and I'm in a position sometimes I guess I could take vindictiveness to a degree. I can do it. But I said, I've just made, on the ethics side of it, I made this bargain with God. I will never do anything. If I can't help somebody, I will never hurt them.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to hurt them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the Christian attitude. We have to come to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Pastor.
All right. Let's go have a good service.
Yep.
Now you wait.
Amen.
That was a good thought too, though.
Wait, Mom.